And we are back for another week of Dynasty Fantasy Football. I'm your host, Tony Walker. You can find me on Twitter at TonyTBDE. And I'm joined today, as always, with my good friend, Kevin Hayes. You can find him on Twitter at Offset Kevin. How you doing today, buddy?
Wonderful. How you doing?
Good. It was nice seeing you and the fam. I know you guys had a small trip back to the cities this last week to the Midwest. So it was great seeing you guys. A lot to talk about though tonight. Storylines and training camp. You know, we're kind of in the midst of week 2 of preseason now. You know, week 3 if you're a Jets and Browns fan. There's been a lot of movement, and I think there's been more movement than we probably expected so far. We're gonna target a couple of big camps. There's been a couple of big free agent signings, and just new as players that we didn't really expect to show out as much as they have lately. Who I think that their name is really starting to rise to the top of, making not only the potential 53-man roster on some of these teams, but also having an immediate impact. So I'm excited to get your take. I'm excited to see who you want to talk about first and what camp you want to talk about first. So I will go ahead and pass it off to you with your first storyline.
All right. Yeah. I'm going to start us off way up in New England. And so going to New England's camp, I know for us in the house league that we have, I have Tyquan Thornton, and I had a chance to trade for Ramondre Stevenson, and I ended up declining that because I had a little worry that perhaps they were going to make a signing, and of course it happened. Zeke Elliott went and signed with the Patriots, and so I went and updated my rankings to see how big a hit that would make on Ramondre, and he basically didn't shift at all. He maybe bumped down one slot. Once I put it in there,
Ramondre did?
Yeah.
He only bumped down one spot for you?
That's about it. I thought it would be more. I added up the numbers, doing it how I do it, and it didn't make that big of an impact. I think I'd already kind of baked in that somebody else was going to get carries at some point there.
For sure.
But I don't know. I'll ask you, but I don't think Zeke's going to make that big an impact, except for maybe a couple touchdowns being vultured. I think Ramondre still has a very solid role in that offense.
Yeah, I traded Ramondre in our house league before the offer was made to you. And I don't think Zeke comes into this offense and takes over the Damian Harris role like Damian Harris had the last 2 years, where he was a, kind of a second down, third down back. He was a goal line vulture. Look, I saw the video of Zeke. He looked a little thick. He looked a little out of shape. He kind of looked like, James Harden when he's, during the offseason, they're trying to force a trade. So, I mean, it's too early for me to say, if I think Zeke is really going to perform well or not. But I agree. I don't see him making as big of an impact as maybe if Damian Harris stayed, or if Kareem Hunt were to sign, or if Dalvin Cook were to sign. I don't get that sense of this backfield, got much better with, an aging Ezekiel Elliott. And I also don't think that there's been a big enough hit on Ramondre Stevenson's fantasy value for me to be scared to draft him still. I like Ramondre. It's hard for me to get away from him. But I think with the situation, what it did do is it makes me want to even get further away from Ezekiel Elliott. New England was kind of like the Badlands for running backs. And if Kareem Hunt went there, like, he was on my no target list, because I just know what happens there. Belichick likes using running back. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, now that Zeke signed, knowing that you didn't make that trade, are you feeling like you could still target Ramondre for less now, or do you have any sort of, change in mindset on, targeting this New England backfield?
One other point on Zeke before I jump over to Ramondre. We follow, all the different team accounts on Instagram, and when they signed Zeke, the Patriots account said, "Oh, Zeke's looking good in the uniform," and they showed these guys walking by, and I was like, "Okay, there's the O-line."
Looked like
Zeke?
Cheeseburger Eddie.
Yeah, I was like, when's the O-line gonna stop walking by and we could see Zeke? And I looked again, it's like, oh, that is Zeke. Whoa, okay. So Ramondre, I'm not targeting him in our league, but if I was starting fresh, he's definitely someone I would look for. I think, Zeke, maybe makes him in the ADP, maybe he'll drop a little bit because of Zeke, but he's going to be a good value going forward.
For sure.
I think past this year, Ramondre's role is going to continue to grow, and Zeke's kind of just a little temporary fill in. So I'm not too worried about that. The other thing I wanted to add was just passing offense. So, first of all, they have Mac Jones. There was a little bit of excitement with him as a rookie. I feel like that faded pretty quick, and I don't know really what anyone knows about Mac Jones at this point. In college, he was throwing to probably the greatest assembly of wide receivers ever in college football history. I saw Alabama posted a remember when the receiver group when Mac Jones was the quarterback there, and it was a picture of their top four wide receivers of Waddle, Smith,
Yep.
Ruggs, and Judy.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, you get handed the keys to a Maserati, you can probably drive it no matter who you are. But what do we think about Mac Jones as a pro? Is he a pro quarterback? What is he?
I mean, I think he could be a good NFL system quarterback. I don't think Bill O'Brien is the best guy to take a talent like Mac Jones and expect him to do much. Mac Jones, to me, he's a 24-year-old version of Kirk Cousins. I really see him in the next couple of years. Once he gets out of this first or whatever contract he is in with New England, going to a team to where he's not asked to be the guy to make checkdowns to the line, to have an offensive-minded head coach like a Kyle Shanahan, like a Kevin O'Connell, like, anyone else besides Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is all about running the ball and playing good defense. I think at first Mac Jones made sense in New England, but I think now that you start to see what did and didn't work for them, the Devontae Parker saga, just with the rigmarole and just the roundabout of all these no-name receivers and running backs kind of, circling in and out of the locker room. I don't see Mac Jones as a guy that I would want to target in fantasy in any format, but also in real life as, a football fan. I would be a little scared if he was our quarterback, but I do see the potential of him being kind of the game manager, the guy who can put up decent stats if you put elite talent around him, and he just hasn't been given that opportunity.
Yeah, he's getting a little reputation of being a kind of a dirty player too. I don't know if you've seen those clips. Whenever he's had a bad play, he'll kick a guy or something like that. I saw that popping up, and it's like, yeah, he's kind of like that guy that used to play at Duke.
Grayson Allen. Yeah, he's a Grayson Allen in the NFL. That's funny.
What I was going to add about the receivers too is my last year lottery ticket waiver wire claim was Tyquan Thornton. I thought, all right, speedy guy, let's see what happens. Everything I've seen has been, he's not doing anything in camp. He's banged up. He got banged up again today, actually, too.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he limped off early in camp. But what I have been seeing is Demario Douglas, unknown name. He's a 6th round wide receiver, the second receiver they took in the 6th round. He's a little tiny slot guy. He's been getting a lot of buzz, getting a lot of separation. And they didn't really have a slot guy, last year. So he fits right into a role and kind of has a skill set that'll differentiate himself from some of these other guys they got in that receiver room. And Bill O'Brien, back when he was the offensive coordinator, one thing they did have was very dominant slot guys that were PPR hogs, like Wes Welker, like Julian Edelman. So I'm just going to throw that out there that I do think maybe there's room for Demario Douglas to make an impact. He's a stash, and he's the guy you hope later on in the year that he makes an impact. But you can get him at the end of the draft. Won't cost you anything. And if you got that room, stash him. And I think there's a chance that he could break out.
Yeah, before we go on to the next training camp storyline, yeah, I mean, New England, summed up, besides Ramondre Stevenson, he is kind of the only guy that's solidified as a fantasy relevant player, in my opinion, in that locker room. This team is a good team, I guess, in taking a long shot, getting that free player at the end of a draft, getting a guy who is literally going to cost you nothing. You'll probably be able to pick him up after the draft. You hit someone in the 7th, 8th, 9th round that you don't like, or they get cut, or whatever the situation is. He is Demario Douglas. He is a guy that I would potentially take a chance on. So, all right, so we're gonna head over to the NFC North now, and we're gonna head over to the Green Bay Packers camp. And it kills me, as you can tell, being a Vikings fan, to talk about this. And it's a franchise that had two back-to-back first ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks in Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. And I don't want Jordan Love to be good, but it's hard because I actually like the guy. Like I like his story. I like what he did at Utah. Right, he went to Utah State, I think, somewhere out west, in college, and he was the Packers traded up, grabbed him in the draft, and now he comes into a locker room with guys like Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, and Christian Watson, where, you know, to me, I kind of get the same feel of what Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre came into in their situations. Their Jordy Nelson days, their Greg Jennings days, the Donald Driver days. They were all young receivers when they got into the league, when they took over their offense. And so I do see that there's a lot of potential with this team. Also fantasy relevancy. I think guys like Jaden Reed, he's a guy that you can get later on in the draft. Christian Watson, if you're doing your startup draft this year, I think you can get him relatively cheap in comparison to other guys, especially in the NFC North. When you look at guys like DJ Moore, Justin Jefferson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's probably gonna be the cheapest guy in the NFC North in terms of wide receiver one potential. But I don't know. It's for me, it's hard to not like what the Packers are doing, seeing what's coming out of training camp. And I think these guys, they don't really have too much competition to worry about, other than the fact that Jordan Love kind of has a 1 year chance, I think, to really be the starter before they bring in someone else to potentially challenge him. What are your thoughts on Green Bay, and what are you liking and not liking out of this camp?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, the narrative. You have a quarterback in the draft, and he falls a little bit, and then gets picked by someone. And when it's Green Bay, everyone's kind of like, all right, well, that's what they do. They find these guys, they groom them behind the Hall of Famer, and he's going to come in and pick up right where the last guy left off. Uh, and when someone falls in the draft and someone else picks them, everyone's like, trash. Who cares? Like Will Levis with Tennessee.
Tennessee, yeah.
He's not going to get drafted in our rookie draft.
Nope.
And it's just because Tennessee took him, and I'm sure if the Packers had drafted him, they'd be like, oh, the next Rodgers.
Next Rodgers.
And I mean, but it's also pretty true. I think there's a lot of capable quarterbacks that got drafted to bad situations, and it destroyed what could have been a good career. So yeah, I'll give Jordan Love the benefit of the doubt. I think we'll see what he can do this year. I think he does have the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Christian Watson is a guy, explosive, that can definitely, he was like an instant touchdown machine when he came on last year. And then Dobbs is a good possession guy. And then I hear a lot of good things about Reed in camp.
Just burning guys in camp, like absolutely torching guys in camp.
And Aaron Jones is, I keep waiting for Aaron Jones to fall off, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have another solid year. Dillon is, I don't know, he's big, gets touchdowns, short yards.
Yep. And I'm glad you brought up Dillon, because I wanted to get your take on this. So I was talking to another buddy of mine, and he had asked me, give me a stash guy that you like after this season, that if you can get today for relatively cheap, but that you think could be one tier up. So an RB2 to an RB1, or hell, even an RB3 to an RB2. Give me a guy. And the first guy that came to mind was AJ Dillon, because we're all waiting for the Aaron Jones drop off. And I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I mean, it could be this year for all we know, especially not having Aaron Rodgers. And I think that, LaFleur, he's going to want to rely on the run. And I think Dillon is more of that power guy that they can hand the ball to. I love AJ Dillon. I traded for him in our house league. I'm banking on him becoming an RB, 2, RB1 eventually. What is your take on this backfield? I mean, we can talk about the receivers all day. They're young, they're kind of unproven. Jordan Love, completely unproven. But this backfield, I think, there's a lot of relevancy here, and I think there's some good value here. Aaron Jones is aging. AJ Dillon is kind of the workhorse back that isn't really a true workhorse. What's your take on this backfield?
I think Dillon, if he's going to be a relevant fantasy player, he's got to take it this year and show it. I don't think they're going to let him have kind of another kind of so-so year and then hand him the reins to be the workhorse next year. One thing I started realizing this year, with all the controversy about the running back market, no running backs getting paid, feels like a supply and demand issue where it feels like there's more capable running backs than there are starting spots in the league.
Agreed.
And that's why you have a lot of these bigger names that just can't find a job. And there's a lot of promising rookies out there that are coming in. And it sucks. I wish running backs would get paid, just because I like watching good running backs. Um, but it makes sense from the team's perspective. Why pay a huge amount if you can find a capable young guy for cheaper? And
Right.
so that's my worry with Dylan, is just that if he doesn't take it by the horns this year, even if they do move on from Aaron Jones, they can probably find a running back in round 2 or 3 next year, and then that's going to be the guy splitting it with Dylan. So I think
Yeah.
he needs to make a name for himself and show that he can be that dominant guy this year. Otherwise, they will probably just draft another guy.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean the last 2 years, Dylan has finished inside the top 26 running backs in PPR. Last 2 years, 186, 187 rushing attempts. Last year he did see an uptick in touchdowns. He did have 7. You definitely saw the goal line use go up, right? So I mean, worst case scenario, I guess the question really becomes, does AJ Dillon have enough touchdown potential to see that sort of, growth? He went from 2 touchdowns his rookie season back in 2020, 5 the next season, and then 7 last season. I mean, it's not exponential growth, but I mean, if this guy's hitting 13, 14 rushing touchdowns, and he's not a pass catching back. He did have 2 receiving touchdowns in 2021. But I mean, if this guy can hit, a ceiling of 13 to 15 touchdowns a year, I mean, I think that alone gives some relevancy in all formats. But I agree. I think Dylan, he definitely needs to prove it this year. And if he doesn't, the Packers are going to go out there, going to get a guy second, third round, or trade for someone. You look at some of these backfields, could there be potentially a Jamal Williams reunion in Green Bay after this year if he can prove that he can do it with the Saints? And with the Saints, with Kamara and their rookie running back out of TCU,
Andre Miller.
Yep, yeah, I saw you snag him today. I was a little jealous of that pick, but all right. So enough about the dirty Wisconsin Green Bay Packers. Let's head over back to the AFC, and this time we're going to the AFC West. Right, we're going over to the Kansas City camp.
Yeah, let's jump over to Kansas City camp. So Mahomes, you're probably not cutting him. You're probably keeping him. I don't know that there's a lot to cover with Mahomes, and probably say the same about Kelsey. I think everyone kind of knows what we're getting there.
Yep.
But then the receiver room. I mean, they kind of proved that they don't really need a receiver last year.
They don't.
So they lost Juju.
When you have Kadarius Toney scoring touchdowns in the Super Bowl, you have a little bit of a question mark on your receiver in the next season. But okay, go ahead. Sorry, I just had to make that.
What I was going to say, I mean, Kadarius, not a talent issue at all.
No,
everyone this season raves about him. It's just he can't stay on the damn football field. He's always hurt, and he's hurt again.
Yeah, I saw that.
He could definitely get healthy and go out there and be a top 20 receiver, or he could keep being banged up like he has been his whole career. Sky Moore, everyone was hoping for it last year. He's out there again as maybe not, who knows?
Yeah.
And the same thing with Rashee Rice.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy that everyone's little camp darling that I'm focused in on, and hush, I'm going to take him in our draft when my pick comes up, if he's available, is Justin Ross. He's got the pedigree. He's a name that, outside of Kansas City, not a lot of people knew about him, but he was a top flight receiver at Clemson, a first round talent. And then he had that spinal condition, and that knocked him out of the draft. And then he goes to KC and he gets hurt and misses all last year.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a guy with size. It looks like he's making some acrobatic catches.
Yeah.
People are raving about him. He's kind of like the Kansas City fans' little darling.
Yep.
If he could stay healthy, this is a guy that could emerge as your feel-good story. Even it's not out of the question to say Mahomes' top receiver target outside of Kelsey. So I think there's a lot of upside there of him. So I just want to throw that name out there because I think he hasn't risen to the point that he's getting picked early in drafts. He's another guy. I'm all focusing on these bargain guys you can find at the end of your draft, but I think he's one of them.
Yeah, if you want to see more of Kevin's bargains drafts, go ahead and check us out on Instagram. You'll see he has a couple of players that might make you scratch your head a little bit, but when you start looking into the numbers and you really start looking into situations, it makes sense, right? Yeah, Justin Ross, he's kind of the guy that I look at. he's the younger Marquez Valdez-Scantling on this team, right? MVS is still in KC. He's still going to be that deep threat guy where he's going to maybe get 4 targets a game, but his average attempt is going to be 40 some yards down the field. So I like Justin Ross. I like his story. I think he does have the potential to work his way into this rotation. And I don't think the wide receiver room is really the competition. It really is with himself, because you talk about Kadarius Toney, the knee problems, the off the field problems, just the work ethic problems. There's been stories ever since he was in New York. There's a lot of question marks on him. Kelsey is not getting any younger. MVS is not getting any younger. At some point, this young receiving core is going to have to hoist up Patrick Mahomes if they want to continue hoisting up Lombardi trophies. So they definitely got to do something. And yeah, Justin Ross, kind of like, when you're looking at the New England locker room with Demario Douglas. I mean, this is a guy where at the end of your draft, you can get relatively cheap, if not damn near free. Take a flyer on this guy. I mean, he really could be, that flex, second or third flex option for you come week 9, 10, once buys start hitting and once injuries start piling up. So I like what's going on in Kansas City. What I don't like in Kansas City is the running back room. This is a mess. I know you had mentioned in one of your videos that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're predicting him to be cut before the beginning of the season. I can't believe he hasn't been cut yet.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a training camp casualty. And I mean, I think we're all on board with Isaiah Pacheco being the starter, though he's been a little banged up, but he's supposed to be ready. So, I mean, he was the unknown that came out of nowhere and got training camp buzz and became their Super Bowl guy, hoisting the trophy, starting running back. And there's another guy getting the same sort of buzz, and it's Deneric Prince. Again, under the radar. I believe he was Pacheco, I think, actually was a 7th round pick. This guy is undrafted. I'm hearing a lot of the same sort of buzz, a little bit different skill set. He didn't catch the ball much at all in college, but they're saying he's catching the ball very nicely in camp, and he might be kind of the 1-2 punch, 2-headed monster with Isaiah Pacheco. It would be a Deneric Prince.
Yeah, Deneric Prince, he's a little bit of a bigger guy, right? More of a bolder than Pacheco. Pacheco's kind of that, scat back, smaller Jerick McKinnon type guy, another aging body on this roster that you have to start asking yourself, how many more touches can this player afford? How many more seasons can this player play? And the question is not many. I mean, Kelsey, it's hard to tell when you have an elite talent like that. Gronk, I think for the last 5 years of his career, people like, this is the year that he falls off, and it never happened. He retired before that cliff fully came. I mean, yeah, there's going to be some downward expectations and probably some slip in their statistics, but at the end of the day, Travis Kelce still Travis Kelce, but behind him there's really no one to take a hold of this offense. So I like this team. I like the Justin Ross. I like the non-Clyde Edwards-Helaire backfield. Pacheco, if you can get him for a decent price in your league, I think that he's going to catch enough balls from Mahomes to make him a reliable RB, back end RB2. But yeah, Kansas City, it's a tricky one for me. I'm definitely liking some other teams to target some players, unless you get the guys like the Kelsey Mahomes stack. So
yeah, and this is more of a gut feel thing. Just to add on Kelsey, I keep waiting for is he going to eventually fall off? He's in his 30s. I don't think he's a guy that's going to just fall off and have a bad year. I think he's the type of guy that's going to have a good year and then just retire at the end of the year before he ever falls off. You look at his stat line. I was looking at him thinking about if he's a Hall of Fame tight end, which he is.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
He from his rookie year till now, he's so consistent. He's been consistent every single year. His touchdowns went up when Mahomes came into the picture compared to I already forgot the Alex Smith, but he's done it, and I just don't see him having one of these years, like a Matt Ryan year where it's like, oh man, he's expired.
Yep.
I think he's gonna have dominant years, and then he'll just retire, and there'll never be some stinker of a year that ends his career.
For sure. Absolutely. No, I agree. And going from the AFC West, we're gonna go back to the NFC North, and this time we're gonna go to Detroit Lions. Outside of Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, I hate this team, both fantasy wise and as a football purist. Um, there's all this hype,
Oh,
and again, it's hard for me to swallow because I am a Vikings fan, diehard Vikings fan. But the thing that I don't get is people, and Vegas included, some of the smartest people in the world who set these odds are putting these ridiculous expectations on the Lions. Go look at their schedule this year compared to last year. Last year they had the fifth easiest schedule. Their best game that they had last year wasn't even a win. It's when they got beat by Philly at home by 3. I think it was like week 2. So I looked at their schedule earlier today. I have this team as maybe a 7-win, 8-win team, and I don't think the NFC North is as good as it was, say, a couple years ago. A lot of it being the fact that the Vikings have a very difficult schedule this year, and I think that they eke the division by maybe a game and a half, 2 games. I don't like this team. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be great. Amon-Ra is going to be great, but this team, I'm calling it now. They are going to be playing from behind more than they'll be playing from ahead, especially in the fourth quarter. And when teams see that they have 2 main guys to look at, a speedy running back who's a mismatch nightmare, got it, and a legit wide receiver 1, got it. You shut those 2 guys down, Detroit's going to go 3 and out more and more and more than people probably expect them to. And I'm too nervous to take anyone on this team really outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, just because he's proven, running back. It's always hard to tell. And then you got David Montgomery and, his pit bull. I don't know if you saw that storyline, but there's been some questions in that backfield. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Detroit? Is there anything you like? Is there anything you don't like? Are you buying on this team, fantasy wise, football wise? What is your take?
it's a bold take thinking that the Detroit Lions are going to disappoint. Um,
Last
uh,
time they won the division was 1993. I was 3 years old.
was Scott
I'm
Mitchell the quarterback?
32. I don't know. I know it wasn't anyone that I can probably remember ever playing. That's how long it's been.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think. I love Jahmyr Gibbs.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got Kamara like potential. And then Montgomery, uh, he's I'm not drafting him, but I could see he might have some value.
Sure.
Amon Ra, I've been harassing the guy in our league that has him, trying to trade for him.
Yep.
No budging. I love him, and I think later in the year when gambling Jameson Williams comes back, I think he's definitely a deep threat. We don't really know what he can do yet, but
Yeah, and and
there's
and
potential there.
and I forget about him strictly because we don't know enough about him, and that's why it's hard for me to want to buy into this team, is because they're either brand new to this team or they just haven't played much with this team. And one of those tenured guys who was only with the team, I think, a year or 2, is now in New Orleans, Jamal Williams. David Montgomery is not going to have that success. Jamal Williams, he was a centerpiece of that team. He was a part of that culture. He was the glue that really held those guys together. And I think when you take away those emotional leaders, you definitely lose a piece of that kneecap biting mentality. And I don't see David Montgomery having that. So for a million different reasons, I don't see this team taking a step forward. Which, if a team isn't taking a step forward, that makes me reconsider the fantasy relevancy of the guys that I would normally try and go after. And I don't know. I don't like this team. I think there's too much hype. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think people got very excited last year that Goff wasn't bad, but he wasn't great either. He was just kind of okay. And I think that's kind of his peak. He's I remember people were ripping the Rams when they took him, that they should have taken Carson Wentz. Well, I guess he won that battle, but
yep,
that's still not saying a whole lot. Um, yeah, I think they're just kind of in the middle, and they're going to benefit from a weaker division.
yep.
There's not a lot of defense going to be played in the NFC North this year.
No,
And I think so. There's probably a lot of points to be had, but just in general, yeah, I think there's 2 fantasy relevant guys on Detroit. There's buzz about their rookie tight end, Laporta.
Laporta, yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I don't have the patience for a rookie tight end right now. And I think down the line he might be okay. But I mean, I just got done being frustrated with how the Lions used Hawkinson. So
Hmm.
I'm not ready to be frustrated over how they're going to use their new rookie tight end toys. So I just, yeah, there's two guys I'm interested in. Other than that, I think the Lions will put up some points, but I think they're going to be about a 8 or 9 win team this year.
Agreed. Agreed. And yeah, Goff, he damn near made my hate list last week, which if you go onto our Spotify, which we're live on there now, you can check our episode out from last week, and you can check out me and Kevin's love hates for this year. We went down all positions that are fantasy relevant on offense. We gave our love hate. Make sure to go check that out. Where we head next, Kevin? You tell me. I know we've been kind of back and forth between the NFC North and the AFC. Where do you want to go next?
I'm lazy. Let's just stay in the AFC West.
Okay.
I want to jump over to the Chargers.
Yeah.
I almost called them the San Diego Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers.
I'm still not used to that. Not seeing them in an outdoor stadium with their powder blues on a grass field. It's weird seeing them in a nice $1 billion stadium with, mediocre at best coaching, which has been terrible to see if you're a Justin Herbert owner.
Yeah. So that being said, 2 years ago, Herbert was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
He was so good that I traded Josh Allen in our house league because I thought Herbert was pretty close to him, and then he took a step back last year. But a part of what made Allen so good the year before was the Chargers finally had an O-line. They drafted Slater. He was very solid. And then he got hurt last year, and then Herbert hurt his ribs, and it all just kind of went not great from there.
Mm-hmm.
Herbert's healthy. The offensive line is healthy. The reports I'm reading is this is probably as good a line as the Chargers have had in a long time. That's usually been the question mark with them. If they can stay healthy, all of a sudden Herbert's got protection again. Controversial move I made in our dynasty league it was so controversial it made one person quit was I traded Austin Eckler to you. And a part of that was we have two different philosophies here. I'm starting to treat some of my aging guys like stock options, where when you hold a stock option, high reward, high risk, high reward. If you get too close to the expiration date, it goes from being a very valuable asset to being worth nothing.
Yep.
So I figured I wanted to trade him while he still had some value, some good value.
Mm-hmm.
And I got younger there and traded him for Travis Etienne.
Yeah.
So I still think Eckler has a good year ahead of him. I think it might be a downgrade. But I'm also a little bit worried that I think they relied on him too much last year. I think they're just constantly dunking it down to him. And it's great for fantasy points. It's great for receptions. I don't know that it's great for moving it down the field and scoring if you're always dunking to Eckler. And they got a new offensive coordinator now who wants to have a little bit more vertical passing game.
Yep.
And so that had me a little bit more worried about Eckler. I think with the drafting of Johnston, they're going to try to push it down the field some more and take advantage of Herbert's howitzer of an arm. And I was worried that those receiving numbers might dip a little bit for Eckler. What are your thoughts since you own the guy?
Yeah, I mean, and this is kind of the opposite situation of looking at teams like Kansas City and New England, who we previously talked about. Is there's too much talent, I think, on this team fantasy wise to essentially hate. I mean, you have Keenan Allen, he's 31. I still think that he can put up wide receiver 1 numbers if he can stay healthy. Same with Mike Williams. I think he's still that deep threat guy, but in camp, he's been, doing more crosses across the middle and being more of Herbert's possession guy, using that big body of his. Quentin Johnston, again, rookie wide receivers. That's always, I trust rookie wide receivers more than I trust rookie running backs. I just think it's easier for them to get to NFL speed at the wide receiver position than the running back position, especially when you do have a 6'6", 236-pound quarterback who can sling the ball like it's nothing. I think that Austin Eckler still has too much value not to target. And my philosophy in Dynasty is it's great to get young, but the goal of Dynasty is just like fantasy football, and it's to win. You want to win your league. You want to win a season. And I made a lot of all-in moves. I mean, I think I have one pick. I had one pick this year, a second-round pick. I think I have 2 picks next year, maybe 3 picks. But I'm going all in on getting some veteran guys, and I am kind of testing the waters and maybe playing the expiration game, too much and getting too close to the sun. I just think that with Austin Eckler going back to Chargers camp, there was the contract worries with him potentially, holding out or not reporting at all. With that being resolved, and hopefully with him re-signing with the team, during the season or after the season, I think he fits this offense too good. And even with Kellen Moore coming in, I think that Austin Eckler is going to be kind of his Tony Pollard. He might not be as utilized because he is a little bit older. He's not as fast, not as shifty as Tony Pollard is. And Eckler's not a guy that's going to get 25 rushing attempts a game. He's not that kind. He's not a Nick Chubb. He's not a Najee Harris type of back. I just think that for fantasy, there's just too much opportunity for him, and he's proven it, right? I mean, he's just proven it time and time out that he is an elite running back in this league. And with the shift kind of going from elite running backs to wanting more of the elite receivers, he's one of those guys that I'm willing to send a big haul off, like a Ramondre Stevenson and a future first round pick for, to try and win it this year. And the other thing,
he gets a lot of touchdowns too, and he has not regressed. It's been a consistently high number of touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, looking at his stats, I mean, so the last 2 years he had 13 and 12 rushing touchdowns. The year the 4 years before that combined, he had 9 rushing touchdowns. Between 2017 and 2020, 9 rushing touchdowns. But in that same time span, he had 16 receiving touchdowns. He had 13 the last 2 years. One thing when I look at running backs, though, is I like to look at the defense. And this team with Derwin James and them getting younger, their D-line is still, in my opinion, top 4, top 5 in the league. When you have a really good defense that allows your playmakers to play when they need to and make plays when it's absolutely necessary, but the dinking and dunking then becomes more viable and more of an opportunistic way of burning the clock, or more opportunity to just get an extra set of downs to kill an extra $120 on the clock when needed, especially in a division with the Raiders, who I think are going to be overwhelmingly surprising. I think they're going to shock a lot of people with Jimmy G. Broncos, let's ride. I don't know how I can really get on that. I still think that they fall flat and fall in 4th place, but when you're playing Kansas City twice a year, you got to have playmakers. And I think in those types of games, Austin Eckler is going to get the ball a ton. And that's where his value to me definitely shines. So I'll risk it. I'll play the stock game. And if I go crashing down, I go crashing down, but at least I tried. So what else, anything else from Chargers camp that you're liking or not liking? I know that there's some good value there. At receiver with the rookie receiver and Quentin Johnson, and also I think Keenan Allen. Is there anyone else on this Chargers offense that you've heard anything about camp that's making you go, okay, that's a guy that I need to watch out for?
It's actually about it. The only other thing was Palmer last year. I mean, I had Mike Williams. He got hurt. Palmer filled in and was actually really good.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of the forgotten man. And I don't know what's going to happen if he's on the bubble for maybe getting cut or what. But that's just what I'm interested to see, because I think he's shown he could be a capable receiver, and he's just kind of getting forgotten in the shuffle. So I don't know if he's a trade candidate or a cut candidate to actually make an impact someplace else.
Yeah, and the one guy that I was going to mention to watch out for is 27-year-old Keelan Doss. I mean, he's been making some plays at camp. He's been doing some. He had 3 catches for 39 yards against the Rams in their first preseason game. Josh Palmer, I think he's a good special team guy. He's just a good depth guy because he has been with the team now for 2 years. This is his 3rd season with the Chargers. I think that there's value, but yeah, I think, again, going back to my opening statement, this is kind of the opposite of other teams where there's a lot of talent, but there's not a ton of value, just because of the fact that there really is no dart throws. It's all guys that are solidified in this offense. So, all right, so we're gonna go back to the North, this time the AFC North, and we're gonna talk about the big boys up front and how an offensive line can change the dynamic of an offense. The Cincinnati Bengals, I think, got sick and tired of seeing Joe Burrow, Joe Cool, get hit like a rag doll the last couple of years. This offseason, they went and signed former Chiefs left tackle Orlando Brown. They have Jonah Williams at right tackle, who did not want to move to right tackle, by the way. That's how good that's how you have a good O-line, is when you move an all-pro level left tackle to right tackle. And being a former offensive lineman, when you're the left tackle, when you're the anchor, when you are the captain of that line, essentially besides the center, it's a hit to your ego. And so when you see an investment in a guy like Orlando Brown, it's someone who owns T. Higgins and Joe Mixon in our house league. I love seeing more news about how their O-line is being invested into, because I know that's going to lead to bigger holes for Mixon and more time for Joe Burrow to throw to his receivers, specifically T. Higgins. Outside, again, this is kind of a Los Angeles Chargers conundrum for me. I see that there's a lot of great players, maybe not a ton of great value, but I still think that guys like Joe Mixon, for whatever reason, people are out on this guy, and he has just consistently performed. I mean, I traded for him, I think, after our first full season. He is sitting in one of my flex spots right now, but the last 5 years, he finished 10th, 4th. He did finish 49th in 2020, but he only played 6 games, 13th, and 10th. So this guy is consistently a top 13 receiver when he can play at least 14 games. Samaje Perine is in Denver. He's a pass catching back. Maybe Chase Brown, you could argue that there's some value. And maybe Irv Smith Jr., if you want to risk if he's going to be hurt or not from walking down the stairs. I mean, there's just, I think with this talent level and an aging receiver who is 27, but a consistent top 13 back, I just think that people who are out on this guy, you can go buy now. And I think with what's coming out of camp and the courthouse, it is all in favor in Joe Mixon. So anything that you like or don't like in Cincy.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned with the O-line. I mean, in my opinion, the O-line is the reason they don't have a Super Bowl ring right now, because Burrow just got worked by that Rams D-line.
Mm-hmm.
If they could have blocked for him, they would have won that game.
Yep.
I think they're loaded at receiver. Chase is going to push Justin Jefferson for the wide receiver 1 this year. I think in my rankings, it's a razor thin margin separating the two of those guys. In a non PPR league, I think I actually favor Chase. And
do you know the one metric why I have Jefferson inching out Jamar Chase? It's the fact that Justin Jefferson is a 6'1", 195-pound wide receiver, and Jamar Chase, I got to pull up his height. It literally came down to his height. That is what made me decide to go with Justin Jefferson over Jamar Chase, was the tangibles. An inch is what made me decide. And the only reason why I like that is because I do see Jefferson more as a red zone target than Chase. Chase can run those ins and outs a little bit better, but on jump balls, I definitely do trust Justin Jefferson more. But literally an inch is what decided me to have Justin Jefferson over Jamar Chase. But yeah, 1A, 1B. They could both be argued as the best receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, if someone picks Chase over Jefferson, I'm not going to rip on him. I wouldn't, but I wouldn't rip on him.
I wouldn't.
So yeah, I mean, since he adds a better O-line to the mix, I think it just raises everyone's upside. It protects Joe Burrow, especially with him getting dinged up here at the start of the year. He's supposed to be back. I'm still a little bit antsy about his injury, just because I'm a Timberwolves fan, and I remember how a calf strain, it's just a calf strain for Karl Anthony Towns, kept him out for basically the whole year. It's right there next to the Achilles. So it is a little bit concerning, but should be fine.
Yeah.
And then Joe Mixon, I don't know. I owned him a couple of times in redraft, and my only issue with Joe Mixon was that it wasn't very consistent. He'd end the year as one of the top RB1s, but remembering how it unfolded, it was a lot of mediocre weeks, and then all of a sudden a week where he single-handedly won you the week.
Yeah.
So I want a little bit more consistency out of him, which a better O-line will definitely help that. So
Agreed.
yeah, I think the potential is all there. And I mean, since he's a team that is in the handful of teams out in the AFC that's challenging the Chiefs. So I could see if Burrow stays healthy and they keep him upright, this is a team that could be a completely dominant offense that is battling for that one seed with the Chiefs all year long.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, I like this Bengals team for a lot of reasons. Small market team. I like Joe Burrow. I like Jamar Chase. I like, what Zach Taylor is doing with that culture. I like this team all around. So before we get
one thing I want to add real quick when we're talking about the Justin Jefferson versus Jamar Chase debate, I think the one the one extra thing I would add, my edge for Justin Jefferson is the Vikings defense is probably going to be pretty bad.
yeah,
So I think you're going to have some shootouts in Minnesota versus I think
chasing
you're going to
points.
have
Yeah,
some actual like closer games or games where the defense is actually keeping Cincy in the lead. Where actually that's helpful for Mixon. But yeah, I think Kirk is going to have to sling it to Justin to keep pace with the other team scoring in Minnesota.
as a shareholder of Justin Jefferson, I'm okay. The Vikings, for all that I matter, for all that I care, they can go 0-17 this year. Get Caleb Williams next year in the draft. Get the guy that's going to be JJ's, elite, quarterback for the next 7-8 years. I'm fine with that as long as JJ can finish, wide receiver 1 or 2. So, all right, before we get to our last training camp storyline, want to make sure to let you guys know we are going to be doing weekly live streams at least once a week. The schedule again is still not fully solidified yet, so make sure you're following us on Twitter, following us on Instagram. You can find all of our updates there. We also have some good shorts on Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and TikTok, so make sure you follow us there as well. Kevin, this last division I'm really excited about. We weren't even going to talk, like we were literally talking before we started the show, and we were like, okay, what other camp should we talk about? And it was a no-brainer, but we got to talk about the Jets, right? And what's going on in that type of a circus. So kick it off to me. Let me know what in this training camp is sparking your interest or disinterest this coming fantasy football season.
Sure. Yeah. I was gonna say too, for the people watching this live, I just noticed I was watching the sunset out my window and I just realized the sun went down and all of a sudden I'm just pitch black in the background here. But because electricity, we don't want lights on. But
oh man, you West Coast folks.
So the Jets. We're gonna have different takes on this.
Yep.
Because I'm a Rodgers hater. I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh, he's going out east. He's going to care again. He's got this loaded offense. He's going to be the Aaron Rodgers of like 7 years ago." I'm not seeing it. He's an upgrade over Zach Wilson.
Clearly. I think either of us at this point could be a upgrade over that guy. But anyways, that's not important.
And in his heyday with the Packers, they had some pretty loaded offenses with, Greg Jennings, Devontae Adams coming on, Jordy Nelson, Jermichael Finley, all these different things. And then towards the end of his career at Green Bay, he had Devontae Adams and then kind of a cast of whatever guys. And he was always bitching to management, get me more weapons. Now he goes to the Jets. And he's got Garrett Wilson. And then his buddy Lazard followed him there to probably have a similar fantasy year as he always has. And outside of that, I don't see them loaded with that many more weapons. Like they got the running backs, but I don't think that lends itself to him having dominant passing numbers. So I am down on Rodgers. I think will help them win. It's a good winning football thing, but I don't see him having a QB1 style year in fantasy. I think he's going to be between QB 20 and 10, probably closer to like the QB 15.
Gotcha.
And running backs, or I don't know, maybe I should pause and we can comment on Rodgers before we jump everywhere else.
I hate Rodgers as a person, as a Packer. Yeah. Let's just get that out there. At least in this first season with the Jets, though, being right now the average drafted quarterback right around 22, 23, I think there's too much value here. I mean, I think Rodgers, he's not Rodgers of 2015, 2016, with an elite defense along with elite pass catchers, along with, a decent running back room. But you got Dalvin Cook. You have Brees Hall, who's looking good, just, activated off the pup list, within the last 48 hours. Garrett Wilson, to me, I'm not saying he's Devontae Adams, right? Like, clearly he's not Devontae Adams, but I do think that he's going to give Rodgers that Devontae Adams look that he needs, the guy that can get the over the shoulder catch, who can take a hit going across the field, who can catch a screen and go 20 yards. Like, Garrett Wilson can do that. Alan Lazard, yeah, I think he's going to be that wide receiver 35, wide receiver 40. He's not going to be that great. I think a lot of people are going to reach for him because, it's, Aaron Rodgers' buddy, they have chemistry. I'm not buying that bait, but again, I just think that Rodgers is going to be able to play the way he wants to play. Again, Nathaniel Hackett is also someone that followed him to New York after getting fired in Denver. And I think that Rodgers flourished under Hackett's system because Hackett couldn't control Rodgers and Rodgers was able to call the plays that he wanted to. And that's what separates Rodgers from 27 other quarterbacks in this league is he doesn't have to be the most athletic. He doesn't have to be the most accurate. He doesn't have to have how the best playmakers are the guys with the biggest contracts. What he does have is the intelligence and the quick IQ at the line to say, hey, no, we're gonna scrap this play. We're gonna go to something else. And he still gets teams with that stupid freaking and he gets someone to jump off and he gets a free play. How many times do you see him do that? That alone to me, like that's a statistic that isn't tracked enough. And I think if people were to look at that with how many free plays this guy gets and how many times he's able to throw the ball down the field with no penalty and just being able to take a shot, yeah, like I'll take that risk. And like I said, Rodgers right now is right around the Dak Prescott Tua range. He's just after Dak and Tua, and he's just before Kirk and Daniel Jones. I think the only person in Dynasty in that range is a couple spots down. I'm taking Anthony Richardson over Rodgers, but I think that in terms of what his ceiling is compared to what his floor is, I don't think there's a huge deviation, but I think he has a high enough floor to warrant high QB2 potential back end QB1 numbers. So we definitely disagree on this one.
Yeah.
I like the situation for him, and he's not going to have to do much other than throw the frickin' ball, call the plays he wants to call. And I don't see this Jets team winning the AFC East. Right now, I think I have them finishing third behind the Dolphins. And their defense is good. It's not great. I think that their defense is a little overhyped. I mean, they definitely have a good D line. They have Sauce Gardner outside at cornerback. They got Sauce Gardner. They got an elite cornerback, but one cornerback's not going to keep you in a game. So I think the Jets are going to be one of those teams that is going to have to chase points, especially playing the Bills twice a year, playing the Dolphins twice a year. And once you get to the dog days of, December and the weather starts getting rough, who has the experience of rough weather? Rodgers. He's already used to those conditions. So it's not like this is something new to him. He knows how to play in bad weather. So yeah, sign me up for Rodgers. I think you get him basically for free right now. You can get him towards the end of the draft. I mean, right now he's overall player about 110. So you're talking, 11th round if you're in a 10-person league. So what else about the Jets before we wrap it up?
Garrett Wilson's going to be awesome.
Yep.
Dynasty, redraft, everything. He's going to have a good year. He's going to have a good career. I'm all in on Garrett Wilson. He's the only pass catcher I'm all in on right now for the Jets. I screwed around with Mecole Hardman on the Chiefs, and it was not that great. I don't think being with the Jets is going to make it any better. Lazard, we know what he is. He's not going to win you any leagues. Garrett Wilson's the only guy I care about. Receiver. If you look at my rankings for running back, I look like a Brees Hall hater. I had him pretty high, and then when they signed Cook, I talked about how Ramondre didn't really take that big of a hit from Zeke. Brees is the other way. I do think that Cook is going to come in and he's going to, especially with Hall coming off his injury, I think they're going to let him come back very slowly. And I think Cook is going to establish himself, and he's still got a little bit left in the tank. He can still break off some big runs. So I think it's going to be a more difficult backfield. Both guys are going to have their moments, but I think it's going to be a very frustrating backfield trying to pick which one you want, unless one of them gets hurt.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, and don't forget they still have Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight. I mean, Zonovan Knight, I don't see him being a threat at all. You know, he's going to be kind of a Boston Scott type of guy where he's going to get maybe 2 or 3 touches a game. He's really going to be that change of pace back when the change of pace back isn't working. Michael Carter though,
you will see him in the free agent pool of your league.
You will. He is free in probably 99.99% of leagues. One thing I do want to point out though, Michael Carter is still on this team, right? And he is a 24-year-old back at North Carolina. His last 2 years with the Jets, he has finished as running back 29 and running back 40 in PPR formats. That doesn't sound great, right? But what that does tell me is those years where he was a running back, he was still competing with other running backs for touches. And when you throw in guys like Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall, his numbers are just an inkling enough to take away the full potential of guys of Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall. I think that if you're a Dalvin Cook or Breece Hall buyer, I think you can get them for somewhat of a discount. Now, obviously with the signing of Dalvin Cook, right, that's going to be the biggest impact. But I think Michael Carter just does enough to also add to that, you know, kind of unsettling feeling of this is a very crowded running back room. And Michael Carter, if you are a Breece Hall believer and you have him, or if you are a Dalvin Cook guy, he is a handcuff you're going to want to get, because both Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook have proven they cannot play a full season without getting hurt, or at least not playing hurt. So a free handcuff. I mean, if you can get a free handcuff from Michael Carter, if you're a Dalvin Cook and or Breece Hall owner, I think he's up there with more of the important handcuffs to have, just with their injury history.
I was just gonna say on Michael Carter. I remember before they drafted Hall, when Carter was a rookie, thinking, "Wow, they found themselves a good running back," and then all of a sudden they drafted Hall, and it's just another one of these
Seattle Seahawks. Yep.
It's just more running backs than there are starting jobs for all of them. I think if you put him on a different team, he could be a starting running back, but he's RB3 for the Jets.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that is going to wrap us up for the show tonight. Again, follow us on Twitter. You can find us at TBDE on Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok. Where else, Kevin? We're all over the place now. Spotify. You can find all of our recording podcasts on Spotify. Yeah, I'm excited to see what next week has. I think we're going to have to do another one of these shows, because, you know, I was watching the Giants and Panthers game before I came up here to my office, and I think there's gonna be more storylines that we're gonna have to talk about. So we will talk to you guys.
Storylines,
yeah,
more segments, more social media. Yeah, looking forward